So please accept my humble obeisances. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So we will begin by offering our dedicating our presentation to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So we will say the Guru Pranam Mantra and Mangalacharan. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajadam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Shratau Pangu Mama Manda Matirkati Matsarvasva Padam Bojo Radha Bhavana Mohana Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadrumadaha Srimat Ratnagara Simhasanasto Srimat Radha Srila Govinda Devo Prashtali Bihi Sevyamano Smarami Sriman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsivata Statastitaha Karshan Venu Swanair Gopir Gopinata Shristunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti Vinasana Simhaiti Namini. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bangum Langayatim Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Mahadavam Sri Chaitanya Mishwaram Om Tat Sat Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiraye Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishna Nigama Kalpataror Galitam Phalam Shukamukaramrita Drava Samyutam Vibhata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadev Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful. although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Nama Pankajanabhaya Nama Pankajabaline Namaste Nama Pankajanetraya Namaste Pankajandre. So Hare Krishna everyone, welcome again to our Srimad Bhagavatam session. So this is our 12th session and we are now moving into chapter 4. But before we move into chapter 4, let us do a quick recap of what we have covered all this while. So we began with chapter 1, question by the sages. So before we even go to the question by the sages, it started off with a prelude. The first 3 verses, Janmadiyasya Yatavan Yavad Pitaratas Chartesu Abhignaswarat, that particular verse, it talked about, it basically sets the standard of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The first verse describes the definition of the supreme absolute truth, the Param Satyam. It's not something cheap or something which is easy to attain. It's absolutely the absolute truth. Beyond all cheating religions and beyond all kinds of every other different relative truths. So when we say truth, there are many truths. Each truth is relative to another truth, but the ultimate truth, so therefore it's called Param Satyam, and that is defined as a person, right? It says, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it is dedicated to a person. It's a personality, and that personality has an abode. Damna Svena Sadash Nirashta Kuhakam. Damna. He has a Dam, holy Dam. So he's very much a personality. And that personality is none other than the Supreme Lord Vasudev, the son of Vasudev, Sri Krishna. And it talks about how the Supreme Lord is able to put everyone, including even Lord Brahma, into illusion to make them think that this material world is the real world. But actually it's not. It's basically a reflection of the spiritual world. So that's chapter 1. Verse 1 and verse 2 and 3 is also continuing the prelude. It sets the standard by saying that Srimad Bhagavatam is the continuation of the cream of all Vedic scriptures, which is basically the essence of all Vedic scriptures is the Vedanta Sutra. And the Vedanta Sutra is a very short description of the entire essence. And to further elaborate that essence is the Srimad Bhagavatam. It is the, it's basically giving the purport. The purport of the Vedanta Sutra is the Srimad Bhagavatam, coming directly from the author himself, Srila Vyasadeva. So that was the prelude of Srimad Bhagavatam, and how this Srimad Bhagavatam is relishable even by liberated souls. Even people who have no karma, who are completely free of sin, who have nothing to do, they are attracted by this Srimad Bhagavatam because it describes the name, form, pastimes, and relationship between the Jiva and the Supreme Lord. So it's very sweet and it's highly attractive even to liberated souls. So therefore that is described, Nigama Kalpatarur Galitam Phalam, that particular verse. And then it sets the scene. The sages come to Naimisaranya. They ask 6 questions, right? What is all good for all humanity? What is the essence of all scripture? Why did Vasudev, son of Vasudev, and take birth in the womb of Devaki? And what are his adventures in maintaining, creating, and dissoluting and having the entire cosmos creation? So therefore he was asking about the Purusha avatars. Then besides the creation, maintenance, and dissolution, what does the Lord do? How does the Lord come to this material world in the form of various different avatars and displays his pastimes? So Leela avatars, we wanted to know about that. And the sages were very concerned because Kali Yuga is coming, and with Krishna, who had left the world, together with him, together with him, all the shelter of everything is gone with Krishna. So where will Dharma now take shelter, now that Lord Krishna is no longer here? So Dharma Sharanam. And then in chapter 2, the Sutta Goswami, who was the guest of honor in that assembly, he begins to give all answers. So he basically answers all of these questions. We have discussed that already. And he talks about the essence of all scripture as being Srimad Bhagavatam, and the shelter of all scripture, the shelter of all dharma is also Srimad Bhagavatam. And he talks about Krishna in his various avatars, his forms. He describes the Purusha avatars very well, and then how he creates, how he maintains, and how the entire cosmos is dissolves into his breathing as Mahavishnu. And then we heard about the Leela avatars, 26 different incarnations, which were described over here. We heard about the different categories of incarnations, right? And we understood the Stuti Phalan, the fruit. Just by hearing these descriptions of the avatars of the Lord, so one becomes purified. So the Stuti Phalan was also granted in the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 3. And we understood also the difference between the real forms of the Lord and the imaginary forms. Imaginary form of the Lord is the universal form, Vishwarupa. So we differentiated this very nicely. And after understanding all these questions being answered, and understanding these pastimes of the Lord, these various incarnations of the Lord, then Sutta Goswami, he starts talking about the ultimate good for everyone. So how everyone should take up this path of the Jivan Mukta. So Jivan Mukta is the person who wants to get liberation from this material world. So what should he do? The path of the yogi. So that was described in detail in chapter 3 towards the end. And it all basically culminates in the Srimad Bhagavatam. All of this, the Jivan Mukta, the path of the Jivan Mukta, he will take shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the entire descriptions of the Lord is in Srimad Bhagavatam. And Srimad Bhagavatam itself is non-different than one of the incarnations of the Lord. And therefore, though Krishna has left the world, he comes as an incarnation at the same time as Srimad Bhagavatam. When Krishna has gone, Srimad Bhagavatam arose like the sun. And this light of the Srimad Bhagavatam gives light and direction to the entire world, especially during Kali Yuga. So religiosity takes shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam, and all jivas who are interested in attaining the ultimate abode, in understanding Param Satyam, they can also take shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, and this Srimad Bhagavatam is the Veda Saram, the essence of all scripture. So this was all discussed, and he also introduced briefly how this Srimad Bhagavatam came about. It was spoken by Sukadev Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. Very briefly, it was mentioned at the end of chapter 3. So this is where it ended. And now we are coming to chapter 4. The chapter 4 is entitled The Appearance of Sri Narada. Right, so how did this, before we talk about the appearance of Sri Narada, we will continue with what happened. So after Sutta Goswami introduced briefly how this Srimad Bhagavatam was initially spoken for the first time by, for the second time. Because first time it was Vyasadev who spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam, and Sukadev Goswami was in the womb. He heard Srimad Bhagavatam. That was the first time, right? Composed by Vyasadev. And then Sukadev Goswami later repeated this same Bhagavatam. He heard this Bhagavatam, digested the Bhagavatam, and he repeated it out again, and it became even sweeter to hear. So, and where did that take place? So he briefly mentioned it took place at the banks of the Ganga, and it was spoken specifically to Maharaj Parikshit. So it just briefly was mentioned like that, and that created an eagerness to it sort of like acted like an impetus, like a preview, so that the sages became very curious. They wanted to know more. Oh, Sukadev Goswami was the one who spoke this, and he spoke this to Parikshit Maharaj. And such a circumstances, what kind of circumstances occurred? How did this come about? What are the glories of Sukadev Goswami and all that? So they wanted to know more. So therefore, after getting their 6 questions answered, the sages of the forest, headed by Saunaka Rishi, they were not satisfied. They wanted to hear more and more. So they put forth another set of basically 9 questions. They put forth to Suta Goswami. So we are going to hear those questions now. So verse 4.1, it begins by Vyasadev, who's the compiler. He is compiling this Srimad Bhagavatam. So Vyasa Uvacha, he's telling the story. On hearing Suta Goswami speak thus, after Suta Goswami described all this, right, the avatars, answered all the 6 questions of the sages, and briefly described the meeting between Parikshit Maharaj and Sukadev Goswami and how the Bhagavatam came, briefly only he mentioned. So after hearing all this from Suta Goswami, Saunaka Rishi, who was the leader of all the munis who were seated in that area in Naimisharanya forest, so he congratulated, right? He was the leader. And how was he the leader? Why was he the leader? So this verse gives the reasons why he was the leader. Saunaka Muni was the leader of the sages assembled, who posed the questions to Suta Goswami because, number one, he was Vriddhaha. Vriddhaha means he was the most elderly. He was the elderly person within that assembly. So that's important. This is basically Vaishnava etiquette. So one is described that one shouldn't be so eager to talk in an assembly when there are elders seated in that assembly. If at all one should talk, they should take permission, or they take their blessings and then raise. So at any questions addressed or any answers given, it should first of all be given to the elder of the society within that assembly. So therefore, Vriddhaha, the most elderly, the most senior. And he was Kulapati. So being elderly alone sometimes is not enough. There has to be another qualification. He has to be the leader by qualification. So Kulapati, the head of the assembly. So one doesn't necessarily has to be the head of the assembly just because he is elderly. Elderly is the basic, the first level of qualification. Higher than elderly, higher qualification than being elderly is knowledge. So one who has knowledge, he supersedes one who is just simply elderly. So in other words, if one is elderly and full of knowledge, then that is the best. But otherwise, one who is having knowledge is superseding just the elderly. And more than that is one who is spiritually qualified. So spiritually qualified means one who has taken initiation vows, or one who is dedicated to spiritual vows. So having knowledge alone is not sufficient. It has to also be dedicated. Someone who is dedicated, one who is using his life for the purpose of attaining the goal of knowledge. See, someone may have knowledge, but they may not do anything about their knowledge, right? They may not act according to their knowledge. So being elderly is the first level. Having knowledge is the second level. Third level is dedicated to spiritual path. In other words, initiation. That is a higher, the higher qualification for being a Kulapati, head of the assembly. And higher than that is Vijnana, realized knowledge. So one may be initiated, one may have knowledge, one may be elderly, but then all of this has to give way to a person who is self-realized. So who has understood this knowledge and who has self-realized it. So that is higher qualification. So these are basically how one determines the Kulapati. So amongst all of them, Saunaka Muni, he therefore is qualifying as the Kulapati. But though he is elder compared to the rest of them, right? Later we will hear how Sukadev Goswami, who is younger than every one of them, only 16 years old, he became the leader of the entire assembly. From Sukadev Goswami, it was spoken, Bhagavatam was spoken, and the rest of the other assemblies heard it for the second time. So for the third time, Suta Goswami now is narrating Srimad Bhagavatam to the sages of Naimisharanya. And right, so here therefore Vriddha, elderly, Kulapati, the elder, the head of the assembly, and Bahuricha, learned. So these were all the qualifications of Saunaka Rishi. And he had these qualifications highest compared to all the rishis engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony. Remember, they all met together to perform sacrifice, to halt the onset of Kali Yuga. And they failed. So that's why out of frustration, they didn't know what else to do. And they saw Suta Goswami over there coming. And therefore they asked him, you tell us now what is all best, all good for the society. So we heard all this already before. So having heard this from Suta Goswami, the answers to the 6 questions, Saunaka Rishi, who had all these qualifications, and therefore the leader of the society, leader of the assembly there, he congratulated Suta Goswami by addressing him as follows. So this is what Suta Goswami told to, this is what Saunaka Rishi told to Suta Goswami. So Saunaka Uvacha, O Suta Goswami, you are Mahabhaga. Mahabhaga means the most fortunate. Bhaga means fortunate. Mahabhaga, extremely fortunate. And respected of all those who can speak and recite. So therefore he is glorifying Suta Goswami as greatly fortunate amongst all those who can speak and recite scripture. Therefore, please relate Katham Bhagavatim Punyam, the most pious of all scriptures, Bhagavatam, which was delivered to you by Sukadev Goswami. So please relate, because Suta Goswami was one of the sages who were assembled when Sukadev Goswami spoke the Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj in a different assembly. So that was a different assembly. So at that time, Suta Goswami was there. So he heard it, and that's why he is now coming and giving the same to the sages assembled in the Naimisharanya. Right? So which was spoken by the great powerful sage Sukadev Goswami. And this was the first question raised in chapter 4. So after the initial 6 questions, Saunaka Rishi now raises 9 more questions. And this is the first of the 9. Please relate Katham Bhagavatam Punyam. So therefore he is asking Suta Goswami, speak the entire Bhagavatam which you heard from Sukadev Goswami. And therefore we have the Srimad Bhagavatam, the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, all the cantos. Suta Goswami will after this speak. So this was the first question raised. Because they are not satisfied with the 6 answers. They want to hear more. So this is one of the qualifications of the listener of Srimad Bhagavatam. And in what, so then he asks, in what yuge and at what sthane? Yuge means in what time, and in what sthane means in what place was this first begun? Where did this Srimad Bhagavatam start? So that was the second question. And why was this taken up? So what circumstances arose? Why was Srimad Bhagavatam, why was it decided to, for Srimad Bhagavatam to be spoken? So why was this taken up? Third question, right? And then he continues, from where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature? So they know, right? Sutta Goswami already mentioned in chapter 2, he gave his obeisances to Vyasadev. So therefore, everybody there knows that the first person to compile Srimad Bhagavatam was Srila Vyasadev. So now Sutta Goswami, Saunaka Rishi is asking, how did Vyasadev get the inspiration to compile this literature? He wanted to know the circumstances for it, right? Where it happened, and where did Vyasadev get the inspiration? So that's the fourth question. And then he continues, his putra, the son of Vyasadev, his putra was a Mahayogi, an equibalanced monist. Monist means impersonalist. He was situated in Brahman realization. So Vyasadev had a son. So initially, Vyasadev compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam to his son. And his son, at that time, when his son was born, he was in the womb, he was a Brahman realized soul. He was a Mahayogi who was Brahman realized, equibalanced monist. Monist means Brahman realized. And whose mind was always concentrated in monism. Monism means oneness, in the oneness of the Brahman. So in other words, he was a liberated soul, a Jivan Mukta. And he was transcendental to mundane activities. So he was already transcended. He was already liberated. He was already in Brahman. But still, when Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken to Sukadev Goswami relished it so much, and he had a change of heart. From Brahman realization, he went on to Bhagavan realization. So that was what happened. So, but nevertheless, his son, being a great yogi and all that, Brahman realized person, but being unexposed, he appeared just like an ignorant person. So there was a story behind this, all right? So we will hear the story later on, what happened. But the sages sort of knew a little bit about the past time, what happened with Sukadev. So Sukadev Goswami, he was born from Vyasadev's wife. Actually, he was in the womb for many, many years. I think it was about several years he was in the womb. And he didn't want to come out of the womb because he was already self-realized. Actually, Sukadev Goswami, he comes from the spiritual world. He wasn't an ordinary person. There was a special pastime due to a curse. So he was in the spiritual world. He was the parrot of Radharani. So, and there was a transcendental pastime that happened in the spiritual world, and he was cursed. And he was cursed to come to the material world. So in the parrot of Radharani, he came down into the material world, and he was named Suka, parrot. So he got the name Suka when he was born. But part of that curse was that he will be born as a Brahman realized person, an impersonalist. But still, as soon as Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken, it attracted his heart. It completely melted his heart. And but before Bhagavatam was spoken, he was a Brahman realized person within the womb. And because he was Brahman realized person, he didn't want to come out of the womb. He was afraid. He was thinking, if I come out of the womb, then Maya will conquer me. So right now I am free from Maya, and I want to remain in this way, and I don't want to be affected. So, but so there was a problem and all that. And Vyasadeva told he could communicate with the unborn child in the womb. Vyasadeva told the child, "Don't worry, I give you my assurance. You come out, you will not be disturbed. You will not be affected by Maya." But still, the child didn't want to come out. Sukadev Goswami didn't want to come out. So Vyasadeva went all the way to Dwaraka and he met Lord Krishna, or rather he requested Lord Krishna to come to see his wife who was pregnant. And Lord Krishna himself personally came and met Vyasadev's wife and told and gave his assurance to the child that you please come out. I assure you that you will not be affected by Maya. And after getting the assurance of Krishna, then only Sukadev Goswami was born. And as soon as he was born, it's described that he grew up immediately. As soon as he was born, within a moment, he grew up to have the body of a 16-year-old person. And he left he left home. So therefore, and when he left home, he was just born, completely liberated. He left home and he wasn't dressed in anything. He was completely naked, no clothes, nothing. But he was in a transcendental mood. His mind was liberated. He was in transcendental position. And being free of the bodily designation, he just walked away. And therefore, it's described here. Being unexposed, he appeared just like an ignorant person. So that was Sukadev Goswami at that time. So Prabhupada describes, Srila Sukadev Goswami was a liberated soul, and thus he remained always alert, not to be trapped by the illusory energy. So he was always careful not to let him, so his mind was always fixed in the Brahman, and he was just wandering about. And he was followed by his father. His father was like, his father's Vyasadeva. He said, "Hey, why are you just going just like that? Come, come." And then he therefore, but the son, Sukadev Goswami, just walked away. So Vyasadeva also followed behind. But as Sukadev Goswami was walking away, he came across a group of ladies who were bathing in the pond or river nearby. So therefore the verse continues. While Srila Vyasadeva was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies out of shyness with cloth upon seeing Srila Vyasadeva. So first Sukadev passed them. There were a bunch of ladies who were bathing without clothes in the river nearby. And Sukadev Goswami walked past, and he was also naked. He wasn't also wearing clothes. And he was young, 16-year-old and all, and without clothes, and he was just walking by. But the ladies who were bathing there, right, they didn't care. They didn't dress their, they cared, but they didn't cover themselves. But when Vyasadeva walked by, following Sukadev Goswami, the father, when he walked by, then what happened? Immediately they tried to cover themselves with cloth out of shyness. So this was a strange thing. So therefore he says, while Sri Vyasadeva was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies with cloth upon seeing Srila Vyasadeva. But these same ladies, they did not do so when his son had passed. But they had not done so when his son had passed. So it's a very strange, these are shy girls, right? Naturally, if a young person who's not wearing clothes walks by, they would want to cover themselves out of shyness, right? But they didn't for the son. But when the father, and not only any father, this is Srila Vyasadeva, when he walked by, they covered themselves with clothes. So this was a strange occurrence. And therefore, Vyasadeva, when he walked by, he asked the ladies. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied. So the sage asked them, why is it that you're covering yourself now when earlier when my son passed by, you did not cover yourself? So the young ladies replied, that his son was purified, and when looking at them, made no distinction between male and female. So they could sense, the ladies, when they were bathing and everything, when Sukadev Goswami passed by, even though the description was that he was clothed in the 10 directions. That means he was clothed in basically nothing else but the 10 directions. That means he was naked, right? So when Sukadev Goswami walked by, the ladies, they could see just by his aura, just by the way he was walking, just by his expression, by the look in his eye, that they could understand here is a person who is transcended the designation of male and female. Here is a person who is transcended the bodily designation. He doesn't see himself as a body. He sees himself as Atma. Therefore, he was in the Brahman stage. And he was displaying that also because he was unexposed, right? Just born, and therefore he was not caring about any social convention. He just left. And therefore the ladies could understand that this person is such a person. And it didn't strike or occur to them also, because when they saw him, they also could see the reflection of what Sukadev Goswami was seeing. They could see a reflection of the vision of Sukadev Goswami as seeing everything as Atma. You know, in Bhagavad Gita, there is a verse, right? Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahma Gavi Hastini Suni Chaiva Swapakecha Pandita Sama Darshinaha. So that verse says, a learned sage will see with equal vision. Pandita Sama Darshanaha. Darshana, equal vision. The Pandit will see the elephant, the cow, the dog eater, and the Brahmana. He will see all of them in the equal vision. So that was what was being shown or displayed by Sukadev Goswami as he was walking. And the ladies, they could see that. And because they could see that, they also experienced the same vision momentarily. And it did not occur to them to also cover themselves. Their social convention, social etiquette, and everything was forgotten. But after Sukadev Goswami passed by and Vyasadev walked by, the spell was broken. They suddenly saw Vyasadev. And when they saw Vyasadev, because Vyasadev was acting the role of a grihastha. He was taking the role of a grihastha. He wasn't displaying himself as a Brahman realized person or a spiritualist, right? So, and therefore, he was covering his own spiritual realizations. So he didn't display it. So it was not he was not exposing himself in that way. So the ladies, the spell was broken, and when they started seeing Vyasadev, they saw a grihastha coming. Oh, an elderly grihastha, a father of this person coming. And when they saw that, immediately the social conventions came again in their mind. So they, out of shyness, they immediately covered themselves. So this was just to describe the glory of Sukadev Goswami. So Prabhupada describes here, as long as such distinction is there. What distinction? Distinctions of the bodily distinctions, right? And bodily distinctions such as what the race, the family, the nationality, and things like that, right? Various distinctions of the body, including male and female. So it's described that the soul is neither male nor female. Prabhupada mentions that in this verse. In technical terms, right? Of course, ultimately, you could say that the jiva is prakriti, a form of prakriti. So prakriti is always female. But at the same time, the soul is also amsa. He is also part and parcel of Krishna. So he's amsa, coming as an expansion of Krishna, a small expansion, a small tiny amsa. At the same time, he is also prakriti, shakti. So he can be male, he can be female, just like the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord can be male, he can also be female, but he's ultimately the Supreme Purusha because he owns all the energies. So therefore, Krishna, the Supreme Truth, Krishna, he became Radha and Krishna. Both are Krishna directly. So in this aspect, the Jiva actually doesn't have a distinction between male or female. So, but as long as such distinction is there, as long as someone is seeing the Jiva as seeing the person as male, female, or putting a bodily designation to that person, one should not try to become a sannyasi like Sukadev Goswami. So this is one of the aspects. So one should learn to see beyond male, female. One should learn to see people according to the verse in the Gita, Pandita Sama Darshanaha. So then one can take up sannyas. So Prabhupada is describing here. At least theoretically, one must be convinced, even if one has not realized such a vision, theoretically his faith is very strong about this conviction. Then he can take up sannyas. That living entity is neither male nor female. So Prabhupada mentions here in this purport. And then he continues, Prabhupada, the outward dress is made of matter by material nature to attract the opposite sex and thus keep one entangled in material existence. So this sexual attraction is the strongest amongst all of Maya's Maya's plan to trap the living entity within this material world. Maya has many tricks, many tricks, many ways to keep the living entity within this material creation. But the strongest amongst all of Maya's arsenal is this sexual attraction between the sexes. So, and the way she does it is to make the jiva think that he is male or he is female in such a strong way that therefore, this kind of attraction rises. So a liberated soul is above this perverted distinction. So Prabhupada says, and Sukadev Goswami was displaying that as he was walking past. And such was his, the aura that simply by seeing him, others also could temporarily see the same vision. So this is the caliber of Sukadev Goswami, a perfected being, a person who was Brahman liberated. So this perfection of the spiritual vision is the liberated stage. And Srila Sukadev Goswami attained that stage. Now you may ask, what about Vyasadeva? Wasn't Vyasadeva incarnation of Krishna? Isn't he Satyavesh avatar? What about him? Are we saying that Sukadev Goswami is greater than Vyasadeva? So, but remember, Sukadev Goswami comes from the spiritual world. He is none other than the parrot of Radharani. So he is he's eternally liberated person. Eternally liberated person. Whereas Vyasadeva, he is Satyavesh avatar. So he is Satyavesh. Satyavesh means another living jiva which is empowered with the potency of the Lord. So, and this jiva, Satyavesh avatar jiva, he is not a eternally liberated jiva. He is a jiva within the material creation, within the material world. So, and therefore, in that sense, he is in the material world, the jiva, and whereas Sukadev Goswami comes from the spiritual world. But still, Vyasadeva was special because he is directly empowered by the Lord. So therefore, he is also in the same stage of liberation. So Prabhupada describes Srila Sukadev Goswami attained that stage, right? Srila Vyasadeva was also in the transcendental stage. But what's the difference? Why when Sukadev Goswami, one effect is seen, when Sukadev Goswami walks by the ladies, one effect is seen, whereas when Vyasadeva walks by, another effect is seen. Because Sukadev Goswami wasn't, because he was unexposed. He was just born and he just walked off in that way. He didn't take a role within the world. He was just walking off as a liberated person. He was assuming his liberated form, liberated personality, and he was walking in that way. Whereas Vyasadeva, he was taking a role, right? You can see here, because he was in the householder's life. Though he is Satyavesh avatar, but still he was having a wife, he was living in a house, right? So there was a social role that he was playing the part of. So he did not pretend to be a liberated soul. He was covering it, he was hiding it as a matter of custom. So therefore we have two types of spiritualist. One spiritualist who is very rarely, the spiritualists will walk off like Sukadev Goswami, completely exposing their real self. This was a very unique situation. But most of the spiritualists, they will hide their nature. They don't want to cheaply display their elevated status. They will walk and talk just like every other person. They take the path of Krishna. Krishna himself set that example. He was behaving just like an ordinary cowherd boy. He was pretending just like as if he's an ordinary Vrishni prince. So in that way, people used to think that Krishna is also one of them, one of the members of the Vrishni family. So that is the nature. So Krishna is setting that example. A transcendentalist doesn't pretend, doesn't try to show off, doesn't give the hint and all that. So that is not the style. You can see also in our entire parampara, none of the Goswamis also displayed their special bhava. You don't see Rupa Goswami coming and telling people, oh, you know, I spoke to Radha yesterday night, or Krishna came in my dream. They don't say all these things to people. These are all very confidential topics, which they only reveal to others who can understand this. So that same example was also set by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we can understand this from here. So when Sukadev Goswami, again continuing the discussion on Sukadev Goswami. So such was the personality of Sukadev Goswami. He was walking naked, right, without clothes, completely uncaring for social convention, and not even talking or anything. So how was he recognized by the citizens when Sukadev Goswami entered the city of Hastinapur after wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangala? So therefore, after passing the ladies in the lake bathing, Sukadev Goswami continued to walk away, wandering here and there. He wandered in the provinces of Kuru, Jangala, and then he also even entered Hastinapur in the same state. So he was appearing like a madman without clothes, hair all disheveled, but still he was extremely beautiful because, you know, he's son of Vyasadeva at the same time, and he is liberated person. So he's not bound by karma. So his body was not made out of karma. He was completely liberated. So he appeared like a madman, dumb and retarded. So how was he recognized for what he was by the citizens in Hastinapur? So that was the fifth question asked by Saunaka Rishi. So Prabhupada here comments, a sage is not therefore recognized by sight. So you can see the sage is hidden. Either he will act like an avadut. An avadut is like this, like a madman. He will not care for social convention. He will not be dressed properly, or he may not even be dressed at all. His behavior and activity might be very strange to our normal social etiquette or social convention, just like Sukadev Goswami. Or he may be like Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva was completely hiding his greatness. He wasn't displaying it either. So therefore, the ladies who were bathing in the river, they couldn't understand the greatness of Vyasadeva. They couldn't see that Vyasadeva was also liberated. So therefore, Vyasadeva didn't display, whereas Sukadev over-displayed, you could say. So it looks like as if he's out of this world, mad. So therefore, Prabhupada says, this is not the way to identify a sage or a sadhu. You don't identify sage or sadhu by sight. Sight is not the thing. It is recognized by hearing. That is the way to recognize who is the sadhu, who is the sage. You know, there is, Prabhupada also used to say, there is a proverb in Bengali. They say that a fool is hidden in the village so long as he keeps quiet. He doesn't open his mouth. So in a village, there may be many people. So there may be a person mixing amongst them. So long as he doesn't open his mouth, nobody can know for sure whether he is a fool. He may act in a certain way, but then people may think, oh, he must have a very deep reason why he's acting that way. Oh, why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? Why is he walking this way? Why is he buying this? Why is he doing this? So nobody will know. But the moment he opens his mouth to speak, then the mystery is broken. Everybody knows, oh, this fellow is a fool. So that's the point. So just like how the fool is not recognized so long as he doesn't open his mouth. So in the same way, as soon as the person opens his mouth, what he speaks will define the person. So if a person speaks rubbish, then you know this person has no wisdom, no bearing, nothing. If a person speaks about materialism, then you can understand this person is just a materialistic person. So it doesn't matter how the person looks like, how the person acts like, but it's very important what the person speaks. So therefore, this is the way to recognize a sadhu. It's by hearing. If one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, then there is no profit. Simply seeing the sadhu is not as beneficial as hearing the sadhu. So that's the reason Prabhupada always says, no, we go to the holy dham in search of sadhu, in search of the Vaishnava, not simply to see the Vaishnava, but to sit and listen to him. Because by listening to him, the words of the sadhu will enter into the heart through the ear. Otherwise, cannot enter the heart. It has to enter through the heart, through the ear, and then it will change the heart. And then it will leave a seed in the heart. So that is the point. So hearing is the process, Shravanam, not by seeing, right? It doesn't work that way. So how did it so happen that Pandaveyasya means the grandson of the Pandavas. How did it happen that the grandson of the Pandavas, who is a Raja Rishi, met this great sage? So basically, Saunaka Rishi is asking, how did Parikshit Maharaj is the great Raja Rishi, who is the grandson of the Pandavas. How did he come to meet this great sage, Sukadev Goswami? And by meeting this great sage, how is it that it was made possible for this great Satvati Shruti? Satvati Shruti means this transcendental essence of the Vedas. How was it possible that this great essence of the Vedas was spoken to Parikshit Maharaj by Sukadev Goswami? What happened? What kind of circumstance was there that gave rise to this beautiful discussion where the Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken? So that was the sixth question raised by the Saunaka Rishi. So Prabhupada gives a comment here. So it's called Satvata Shruti. Satvata Shruti means Satvati Shruti. Satva means mode of goodness. So it transcends the mode of goodness. Satvati Shruti. Shruti means Shruti basically talks about the Vedas. So it's basically the essence of the Vedas. And it is also called Sukha Samhita. or the Vedic hymn spoken by Sri Sukadev Goswami. So remember, the first time Bhagavatam was spoken by Srila Vyasadeva, a great personality, none other than the Supreme Lord incarnation himself, Saktyavesh Avatar. Vyasadeva spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam to Sukadev Goswami. And Sukadev Goswami heard this and he repeated this Srimad Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj. And at that time, it became even sweeter, even more relishable, even more wonderful to hear. And because it was so relishable and wonderful, when Sukadev Goswami spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj, at that time, Vyasadeva was also there to listen. So he was basically listening back to his own composition. And he relished that particular description of his own composition coming from Sukadev Goswami, his son's mouth, even more so than his own composition. So it's the same topic, Bhagavatam only, but after he taught it to his son, when his son spoke it back, and when he heard it, it sounded much sweeter to him. And therefore he recorded this conversation. So that is what is recorded by Vyasadeva ultimately. He recorded that conversation between Parikshit Maharaj and Sukadev Goswami because he was there in the assembly. So therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam is glorified also as Sukha Samhita because it was spoken by Sukadev Goswami. And then Sukadev Goswami was accustomed to stay at the door of Griha Medinam only. So here we have heard the term Grihastha, right? And we also have heard the term Griha Medi. So Griha Medi is the opposite of Grihastha. Grihastha is householder in Krishna consciousness. So one who is trying to, is basically a yogi, a bhakti yogi in Krishna consciousness who is a householder. That is Grihastha. Griha Medi is a householder who is not in Krishna consciousness. That means their focus and their goal is not spiritual life. It's basically materialism, sense gratification. That is the purpose. So that is Griha Medi. So Sukadev Goswami, in his many wanderings, as he was wandering around in the various provinces of Kuru and Jangala, and as he entered Hastinapur, he was going door to door of various Griha Medis. So when he entered the house of Griha Medis, he only stood there for long enough for a cow to be milked. So Prabhupada describes this is basically like half an hour. So the sages is described, they go to the Griha Medi, the materialistic people of this world, as a favor, not because they need something, right? So Prabhupada here, he gives a nice comment to describe this verse. From his activities, those who are in the renounced order of life, the sannyasis, the parivrajakas. So here, Sukadev Goswami was acting like a parivrajaka. Parivrajaka means simply one who is spiritually walking here and there to preach, or walking here and there, wandering about, just like Narada Muni, chanting the glories of the Lord, speaking the glories of the Lord to others. That is their goal of life. So these kind of people, they are known as parivrajakas. So from his activities, those who are in the renounced order of life should learn, the sannyasis and the parivrajakas, those who want to be like them, they should learn that these people have no business with householders. So here it's described Griha Medi, those who are materialistic householders. They have no business with such materialistic householders, save and except to enlighten them in transcendental knowledge. So therefore, in the name of begging, it looks like as if they were begging. So they would go house to house begging, but simply by this begging, they purify the Griha Medis when they go and beg from them. The Griha Medis, by dint of them serving something to these people, they get Agyata Sukriti. So, and if they are even more fortunate, they may speak something to such saints, and they may hear something, and it may enter in their ears and go into their hearts. And in this way, they may be benefited. So it is simply a social service. So these sannyasis, the preachers, the parivrajakas, they go house to house begging simply as a social service, not as a parasite. They don't care. They are not interested in their own maintenance. Krishna maintains them. But they, in the name of begging, in a very humble way, in this way, they enter into the hard-hearted residences of the Grihamedis. Otherwise, the Grihamedis won't let them in, isn't it? So, so in this way, they come and they plant the seed of devotion. They allow Agyata Sukruti to take place. So Sukadev Goswami was accustomed to stay at the door of Grihamedis only long enough for a cow to be milked. So not more than half an hour he will stay in one place. He keeps moving, he keeps wandering. So, and in this way, he did just to sanctify the residents. So each residence he will go simply to sanctify those residents of the Grihamedis. And then he continues, it is said that Abhimanyu Sutam, so before that, right? So therefore, it's basically linked to his earlier question. How did this happen that Parikshit Maharaj heard the Srimad Bhagavatam from this personality, Sukadev Goswami? Because Sukadev Goswami only stays half an hour in each place. He doesn't even stay longer than that. But how is it that Sukadev Goswami could stay in one place for 7 days and 7 nights and speak Srimad Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj? So isn't it amazing? So how Sukadev Goswami made this exception? He broke his rule of staying half an hour in one place. So he was asking these questions. So it is said that Abhimanyu Sutam is the Bhagavato Uttamam. So now Saunaka Rishi is talking about the listener who is Parikshit Maharaj. So it is said that Abhimanyu Sutam, the son of Abhimanyu, who is that? Parikshit Maharaj, right? It is said that Parikshit Maharaj is a Bhagavato Uttamam. He is a great personality. He is a great pure devotee. Bhagavata Uttama. Uttama means the topmost devotee. And that his Janma and Karmani are all Maha Ascharyam. So Saunaka Rishi knows about Parikshit Maharaj. He knows Parikshit Maharaj wasn't an ordinary person. This son of Abhimanyu, Parikshit Maharaj, everybody knows that he is Uttama Bhakta. He is great pure devotee, and that his birth, his Janma, and his activities, Karmani, are all not ordinary. They are all Maha Ascharyam. So, you know, in Tamil also we say Acharyam, right? So this is Maha Ascharyam. Very, very outstanding, very, very amazing, wondrous. So why is that so? So later, in later chapters, this this description about Parikshit Maharaj will be given. Sutta Goswami will answer all this. So actually, just to give a brief understanding, Parikshit Maharaj, even before he was born, even in the womb, there was a Brahmastra which was coming to destroy him. And this Brahmastra was defeated by Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord Krishna, his mother came and prayed to him. Pahi pahi mahayogi deva deva jagatpate nanyam tvam abhayam pasye yatra mrityur parasparam. Oh, pahi pahi, save me, save me, save my child, save my child. Deva deva jagatpate, oh greatest of gods, you are Krishna. Only you can save me from this Brahmastra which is coming. So, and then Krishna immediately entered into the womb of Uttara, the mother, and then destroyed the protected Parikshit Maharaj. And therefore, his birth wasn't ordinary. And while within the womb, the child could see the Supreme Lord even before he was born. So he was a very special person. So his janma, his birth, and when he was born to who? He was born to the, because Abhimanyu was already killed, he was, the king at that time was Yudhishthira Maharaj. He was born to the Pandavas as the heir to the throne. And Yudhishthira Maharaj was personally guiding him together with Arjuna, right, the grandfather and all of them. So, and such a fortunate person. He was saved by Lord himself. Therefore, his name, Parikshit Maharaj, is also known as Vishnu Ratha, one who is personally protected by the Supreme Lord. So that is Parikshit. So his activities are, his birth is special, very, very, very out of the ordinary. His activities are also Maha Ascharyam. So if you read about his activities, later in Bhagavatam, it will describe how Parikshit Maharaj came across Kali, the personality of Kali, Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga took a personality form, and he was attacking the two cows. The cow and the bull. The cow was the earth personified, and the bull was religion personified, and Kali Yuga was attacking both of them. The cow, the earth was crying, he was attacking the bull, which was protector of the earth. And Parikshit Maharaj came and he gave his protection to the earth as well as to religion, and he chastised Kali suitably, and he was also merciful to Kali, giving him a place to reside, bidding his time. So such activity is certainly uncommon, very, very special. So therefore, his janma and karma are all Maha Ascharya. So this is the personality called Parikshit Maharaj. And therefore, please tell us about him. They are so eager to hear about Parikshit Maharaj, who was the person who received Srimad Bhagavatam. So this was the 7th question. And then they continued. This Parikshit Maharaj, he was a great emperor and possessed all the Shriyam of his acquired kingdom. Shriyam means opulence. He didn't have to work for it. He simply inherited the kingdom from Yudhishthira Maharaj and the Pandavas. At that time, the kingdom was already so wondrous. It was eclipsing even the Indraloka. It was like Vaikunta almost. So therefore, he just acquired this kingdom, which was full of various opulences. We will hear about these opulences later in Srimad Bhagavatam, within the first canto itself. So he acquired all the opulence of the kingdom. He was so exalted that he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty. Simply by his existence, the glory of the parampara was increased so much. Already the Pandavas were so wonderful, but the grandson was also so wonderful that the Pandavas' lineage, dynasty, parampara was glorified to a very, very great degree, simply by the due to Parikshit Maharaja's glory. So such a great grandson they had, the Pandavas. So he had great kingdom, he had great fame, everything was wonderful, the world was superb, everything was there. And then, why did he give up everything to sit down on the bank of the Ganges and fast until death? So this was the story of Parikshit Maharaj. So Parikshit Maharaj, we all know, he fasted and he gave up all his kingdom in the prime of his youth, in the prime of his success. He gave up everything and sat by the Ganges and fasted till death. So why did he do this? 8th question. This was the 8th question asked by Saunaka Rishi to Sutta Goswami. So why is he fasting till death? Why did he want to die? That was the question. And further, to reiterate, Saunaka Rishi continues, he was such a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. He didn't even have to fight them. Simply by going, the enemies themselves would surrender. They will come to him, bow down at his feet, and surrender all their wealth. Just like Parikshit Maharaj here, he chastised Kali. You know, when he goes, he sees Kali, personality of Kali dressed up like a king, attacking the bull and the cow, earth crying away. Parikshit Maharaj immediately lifted his sword and was about to attack the personality of Kali, but he didn't even get a fight. Immediately, just looking at his effulgence, his tejas, the personality of Kali immediately surrendered. Oh, no, 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 I cannot fight with you. You are great. Please give me mercy, protection. So this was the greatness of Parikshit Maharaj. Such chivalry he had, such virya he had. He was such a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. They know by surrendering to Parikshit Maharaj, they will be benefited. They are not going to lose by surrendering to him. They will be benefited. So such was the glory of this king, Rajarishi. He was full of, Parikshit Maharaj was full of yuva. Yuva means youth. Youth and all the benefits of youth. He was very handsome, very good looking, born to a wonderful family, in the fullness of his youth. And he was full of viraha. So viraha means great strength, power, chivalry, right? Dustyajam Shriyam. So he had Shriyam, opulence, which was insurpassable. Dustyajam. No one had greater opulence than him, not only within the earth, but within the three worlds, within the three planetary systems, Bhur, Bhuva, and Swarga. None of these were able to, even Brahmaloka, so could not cross his opulence. So such was this king. He had all of this to the maximum material benefit. And all of these were difficult to give up, right? If we had such things, even for a little bit of any of these things, we find it so difficult to give it up. But Parikshit Maharaj had them all in maximum amount. He had everything anyone ever desired. They were difficult to give up. But yet, right? Aho! Amazing, isn't it? Aho! How is it possible? Why did he want to give up everything? So, this was what Saunaka Rishi wanted to know. After having so much of everything, how is it? Isn't it Acharyam? How did he want to give up everything, including his life? So therefore, he reiterates the 8th question, right? Why did he give up everything? So he's asking in a different way, not only because why he wanted to die, he wanted to know how could he want to die when he had everything? How could he give up everything? So it's a variation of the same question only, but I still put it as the 8th question. So Prabhupada gives a comment. Okay, before that, so Parikshit Maharaj, not only his janma was Maha Ascharyam, not only his karma was Maha Ascharyam, his death was also Maha Ascharyam. It wasn't an ordinary death, right? So he fasted for 7 days and 7 nights, sitting by the Ganga without sleeping, listening to Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by none other than the great Sukadev Goswami in the assembly of all the greatest sages ever existed, not only within this world, but within the heavenly planets as well, within the entire planetary systems within Brahmaloka. Narada, Vyasa, all the people, everyone was there sitting with him, listening to Srimad Bhagavatam in that holy place for 7 days and 7 nights. And in this way, at the end of which he died, and not an ordinary death also, right? So how is it that he could, so it's a very amazing story. So how could he give up all this? So Prabhupada says here, materially everything was satisfactory for Parikshit Maharaj. Therefore, there was no question of untimely giving up his kingdom and life. The sages were all eager to hear about this. And then we have this wonderful sloka coming in Srimad Bhagavatam. Sloka 4.12. This is the sloka 4.12. Let's say this sloka. Shivaya lokasya bhavaya bhutaye ya uttama shloka parayana janaha jivanti natmartam asau parasrayam mumocha nirvidya kutaha kalevaram. So the translation is, those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead live only for the welfare, development, and happiness of others. They do not live for any selfish interest. So very beautiful verse which describes a pure devotee. So it says here, Uttama Sloka Parayana Janaha. So one who lives devoting his life to the cause of Uttama Sloka Parayana. Uttama Sloka means, the Parayana means the cause of Uttama Sloka. Who's Uttama Sloka? We've heard many times already. Uttama Sloka is the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. So the meaning of Uttama Sloka is that person which is the most greatly glorified in the scripture with choice poetry and beautiful verses. That person which is described in the scriptures, he is Uttama Sloka. So the sloka which glorifies that personality. So those who are devoted to the cause, Uttama Sloka Parayana Janaha, they live Jivanti. They live only for Shivaya, for welfare of everyone, for the welfare of all living entities. They live only for Lokasya Bhavaya. Lokasya means this world, and Bhavaya means the happiness and development. So they live for the purpose of the happiness and development of all the Bhutaya. Bhutaya means living entities of the world, Lokasya, and for their welfare, Sivaya. So this is their goal in life. They live for others, for other people's ultimate development, ultimate benefit. In other words, they live to liberate other jivas. They live to give spiritual benediction to other jivas. They do not live for any selfish interest. So it's a very nice verse to remind us again and again about the heart of the pure devotee. So here it is described, Parikshit Maharaj, Prabhupada gives the purport here. Parikshit Maharaj, he was not a foolish and partial administrator who would arrange for the protection of one living being and allow another to be killed. So he was a great emperor. He was a Raja Rishi. And Raja Rishi means a king is understood to be the representative of the Supreme Lord on earth. Just like, you know, in Islam also they say Khalifa, right? So a Khalifa is the representative of God on earth, supposedly lah. And that's the same idea with the king. So therefore, a representative of God on earth, what will he do? Representative of God on earth, he doesn't exploit people. He doesn't exploit not only people. So he must be fair to all the living entities. So he wasn't just an ordinary foolish king who would arrange for protection for one type of living being and allow another type of living being to be killed. So that is narrow-minded. That is not broad-minded vision. So a king is not only to protect one group. Because he was a devotee of the Lord, he knew perfectly well how to conduct his administration for everyone's happiness, including men, animals, plants, and all living creatures. So how can one do this? How can one achieve this? It's not possible to achieve this based on our own material imagination or our own concoction or our own thinking or whatever that we think is right. It's not possible to give happiness to everyone in this way. It can only be done if it is done according to scriptural injunction, because scripture is perfect. Scriptural injunction comes from the Supreme Lord, and by whatever the Supreme Lord does, simply by watering the root of the tree, the entire tree, together with the leaves, the twigs, the flowers, the fruits, the branches, all of them are nourished. So the only way to satisfy all living entities is to follow the instructions of the Lord, basically to follow scriptural injunctions. So Parikshit Maharaj therefore was doing this, and that's the reason he is called Raja Rishi. He was not just Raja, he was Raja Rishi because he was fully abiding by scripture, upholding dharma, just like how Yudhishthira Maharaj before that upheld dharma for the purpose of pleasing the Supreme Lord, not for any other purpose. So he was always therefore busy in the welfare work of the public, not only for this life, but also for the next life. That's why he's called Raja Rishi. So his vision wasn't limited to only material bodily sense gratification. He was doing all that he's doing so that people are benefited not only within this life, but in their next life. So ideally, they will go back home, back to Godhead. So that is the purpose. That is what a Raja Rishi does. So therefore, the king in those days, Raja Rishi, the title Raja Rishi, he's a representative of the Supreme Lord. They will protect the citizens and they will give the proper education and engage the citizens in the right way so that they will have material prosperity while they are living. But at the same time, the entire society was aimed towards self-realization or God realization. So that's why it's called Varnashram Dharma. So Varnashram Dharma needs to be protected by a Raja Rishi. Otherwise, it will be exploited. So that's the point here. And the purpose of Varnashram Dharma is a scientific way of organizing society so perfectly, so beautifully, that men, animals, plants, and all living creatures are happy within that kingdom. And at the same time, all of them are elevating themselves and going back to Godhead in their end of life. So that was the purpose of Varnashram Dharma. Society was guided by Brahmanas and devotees who had transcendental vision. So therefore, coming to our verse, we are coming towards the end. So even though the emperor Parikshit was nirvidya, because nirvidya means free from attachment, free from all attachment. That's why he could just give up everything, right? So even though the emperor was nirvidya, how could he give up his mortal body? So the sages were asking, all right, I can understand that he's a great Raja Rishi. He gave up all material opulences. He gave up even everything and left. He just gave up all his material opulences. I can understand that he is not attached. He's surrendered. He's renounced. Okay, that I can understand. But why did he give up his body? Because he was a shelter for others. Just by his presence and by his existence, so many good things are being done. So many living entities are benefiting from Parikshit Maharaja's protection. So how could he give up his body? Wouldn't it mean that others are not getting his protection? So isn't this in one way selfish? So why would he do this? So they couldn't understand this. But of course they knew that Maharaj Parikshit was a great personality. Not that they were thinking secretly that he's a selfish person. They wanted to understand correctly what was the motive. How did this come about? So this was the 9th question. So therefore, Saunaka Rishi is nicely asking these 9 questions to Suta Goswami. So he continues, we know that you are expert, Snatam, in the meaning of all subjects, Vishaye Vacham, all things which are spoken and recited. Visaye vacha means all things which are recited and spoken. In other words, the scriptures. We know that you are expert and in understanding all the subjects, except some portions of the Vedas. Chandasat, this is the word which is used. Now, what does that mean? How do we understand this? So, we thought Sutta Goswami is expert in everything. But here, Saunaka Rishi is saying, you are expert in everything except some portion of the Vedas. So, how to understand this? So, Vedic scriptures, we have the Vedas, right? The Shrutis, which are the 4 Vedas, plus the Smriti, which is the 5th Veda, right? So, all of these are Vedas. And we can also understand that, remember I mentioned before, that majority, 75% to 80% of the Vedic scriptures are dedicated towards karma kanda, fruitive activities, materialistic activities only, right? And the remainder 25% is dedicated for spiritual activities. So for example, within the 4 Vedas, we have the Samhita, the Brahmana, the Aranyaka, the Upanishad, right? So Samhita and Brahmana are mainly material karma kanda, especially the Brahmana. So Brahmana is all about, the Brahmana section of the Vedas is all about rituals, performing different upacharas, different rituals, mainly for karma kanda activities or fruitive activities. So under there is this concept of Vedanga, which assists the Brahmana. And what is this Vedanga? Vedanga, there is Siksha, pronunciation of Sanskrit mantras, how to pronounce properly. Chanda, meter, right? Vyakarana, grammar. Nirukta, meaning. Kalpa, ritual. So remember this word, Chanda. And you can see here, Chandasat, except some portions of the Vedas. So what happens is, there are 2 types of people who understand the scriptures. So one person are called the Brahmanas. Now the Brahmanas, they focus themselves mainly to the karma kanda section of the scripture. So they are expert in Brahmana Samhita section, where they know how to pronounce the mantras very nicely. They know how to pronounce the various mantras for the rituals, and they know how to sing the mantras also in the proper meter, in the proper rhythm, in the proper melody. So that melody or meter is called Chanda. So remember this one, Chanda Sat. So Sutta Goswami is expert in everything except the chandas, meters, because he's not that type of person. He is not the traditional smarta type of Brahmana. He is the other type of scriptural person. He is known as the Parivrajakas. Remember, those saintly people who go around wandering, preaching, and who are dedicating themselves to the goal of the Supreme Lord. So they are known as the Parivrajakas. So these Parivrajakas are not interested so much in the fruitive karma kanda materialistic activities given in the Vedas, especially the rituals, and therefore, in rituals, you need someone who's able to sing or say the mantras in a certain tune, in a certain rhythm. So they are not expert in that. So they are not expert in Chandasat, in Chandas, meter, because that's not their training. Their training is understanding the meaning of the goal, the meaning of the entire scripture. So that's the difference, right? They focus more on the Smriti, the Puranas, the Itihasas, and the Upanishads, the Vedanta Sutra, of which Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam is the chief. And they understand the goal and purpose behind this. So this is basically what is known as the Parivrajakas. And these Parivrajakas are not particularly expert in the pronunciation of the meter of the Vedic mantras. Whereas the Brahmanas, they are trained in this, but they don't understand the purpose of it. They don't understand the deeper Upanishads or the goal of the Smritis. So that's the Brahmana. So Prabhupada says, realization is more important than parrot-like chanting. So therefore, Parivrajakas are more important than the Brahmanas. Both are needed in society. Both are serving the goal. Brahmanas are necessary for the Pravritta Marga, those who are taking the path of sense gratification. So for them, we need Brahmanas so that they slowly, gradually elevate themselves, remove their desire for sense gratification, and come to the Nivriti Marga, the path of renunciation, of which the Parivrajakas are the masters. Right? So this is basically the Karma Kanda section cannot give one liberation. Else the Nivriti Marga, the path of renunciation, frees one from the cycle of birth and death. So this is the last verse for today. So, and therefore, Sutta Goswami, Saunaka Rishi is telling Sutta Goswami, and thus you, since you are expert in everything except the chandas, right? You can clearly explain, Sama Chaksva, clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you. So, and this is where Sutta Goswami will stop talking. Sorry, Saunaka Rishi will stop talking. And after that, Sutta Goswami will then give his full deep discussion. So in the earlier parts, the 6 questions raised by the sages, they were given short, brief answers by Sutta Goswami. But after hearing, so Sutta Goswami was testing them. I give you a brief answer, see whether you're satisfied with it and you go off or not. But this is the test to see who is really interested in understanding Srimad Bhagavatam. Do they want to know more? So, and they passed the test. Saunaka Rishi passed the test because he clearly indicated, I want to know more. He asked 9 questions now, please. And these questions he asked in such a way, please describe. Don't give short answers only, right? So this is where it stops. So deeper answers will come from Sutta Goswami, and those deeper answers will make up the entire remaining Canto 1. And then it will talk about the full description of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So now we just conclude. The sages are eager to hear more. So verses 1 to 13, what is it that they want to hear? They want to know the history of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The first 4 questions. First 4 questions. Number 1, relate the entire Bhagavatam to us. So that is the general thing. He's going to give the entire Bhagavatam, yes. But at the same time, they want to know history, where it took place, when it took place, when was it first spoken, why was it recited, what inspired Vyasadeva to compose Srimad Bhagavatam. So these are the first 4 questions which make up the history of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then they want to know more about the speaker, Sukadev Goswami. So Sukadev Goswami, a liberated person, right? So wonderful. So can you tell us more about him? So that will be the 5th question. And the 6th question to 9th question, they want to know more about the receiver, the listener of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Parikshit Maharaj. So these questions will be fully answered in the rest of the chapters in Canto 1. So by the time we go to the end of Canto 1, all this will be fully described and very, very beautifully understood. All right, so with that, we like to end this session for today. Let us recite Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara, Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. So Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you very much for your time and your patience also. Sorry, I exceeded the time again. I have this eternal problem. So I actually thought I could finish this earlier, but somehow or other I spoke more. Please forgive me. but if you have to leave, it's okay. No issues with that. Any questions anyone wants to raise before we close?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Ram Namidu Prabhu.
Prabhu, so Sukadev Goswami appearance is after Mahabharatam, is it? After Mahabharatam.
After, yeah, correct.
Sukadev Goswami appearance day was after Mahabharata war.
Yeah, I think so. Should be.
Yeah, it's the way we understand the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Hmm.
It looks like. And Prabhu, this Maharaj Parikshit, due to his leniencies and kindness, okay, due to one man's leniency and kindness, he didn't kill Kali. Now the whole generation is suffering because of him.
Yep.
If he's around, and then you would have given the authorization for Kali to leave. But he himself want to escape from this material world. I mean, that is another story. But why he didn't kill? Now we are suffering.
Right. So we have to understand, number one, this is the will of the Lord. The Lord wants Kali Yuga to take place. Why? Because there are many reasons for that. Later we will talk into the why. Second reason, those who take birth in Kali Yuga are sinful people. So if we are not sinful, we wouldn't have taken birth in Kali Yuga. We would have taken birth in some other yuga. You know, we were taking birth so many yugas. We were in Brahma Loka, we were in Indra Loka. We had the chance to go back in all of these births. But did we go back? We didn't. We wanted to continue enjoying. So when times were wonderful, times were great, we didn't take the opportunity well. So in Satya Yuga, everything was golden, wonderful. Did we go back to the spiritual world? We didn't, because everything was wonderful. We just didn't take it seriously. In Dwapara Yuga also, we didn't want to go back. We still wanted to remain. In Treta Yuga also, we still wanted to remain. So therefore, the nature of people, the nature of the jiva is such sometimes that unless there are difficulties in life, we will not think of the Lord. We will think that this world is wonderful. Everything here is already great. Everything here is already nice. Why do I need to go back to the spiritual world? Why do I need to think of Krishna? So therefore, in Kali Yuga, Krishna is becoming impatient. He's saying, no, I want you all to come back to me. You're not coming back. So I will increase the fire. So I'll put you in Kali Yuga and I'll give you the simplest process to go back to Godhead. So let the fire of Kali Yuga be the impetus for you to take up the chanting, to take up this devotional process and come back to me. So that's his plan. So it's part of his plan. So Kali Yuga is part of the plan. So therefore Kali has to survive. So that's the reason all this happened. And at the same time, it is also the nature of Parikshit Maharaj. A pure devotee is always merciful. He will, because Kali surrendered. So Kali also knows. So therefore he surrendered to Parikshit Maharaj, and Parikshit Maharaj therefore gave him a place to stay. And when Parikshit Maharaj left, right, Kali took more power, but that is part of the nature of how things were meant to be. We will hear more about that later in chapter 17 and chapter 18, how very nicely Bhagavatam will describe all of these points so we can understand better. Hare Krishna.
Okay, Prabhu.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Any other questions before we stop? So now that we are all born in Kali Yuga, right, there's nothing to be sad about, because, you know, we could have been born in other Kali Yugas where there was no Krishna coming, where there was no Chaitanya Mahaprabhu coming. This is the one day of Brahma. In this 71 Divya Yugas, in this particular Kali Yuga, Mahaprabhu came. And we are born in that Kali Yuga. And Mahaprabhu came and he gave us this process. So we are very, 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 very fortunate. It is said that even the Devatas want to take birth in Kali Yuga during this period where Mahaprabhu comes, because they know this is the easiest way to go back to Godhead. Because in Indra Loka, too much materialism. It's difficult to focus on spirituality. Right? So therefore in Kali Yuga is the perfect. So they want to take birth here and they want to purify themselves and go back. And they did it. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was here, they all came and took birth and they purified themselves. Our Indra became purified. Brahma, already great devotee, became super purified. So all these people became purified. So we can also continue this. We can also take up this process. Prabhupada came, right? Krishna continuously will send. We will have continuous devotees. Now Jayapataka Maharaj is in Malaysia. So like that, so many people are coming. Let us take this process and go back to Godhead, right? So that's the point. So Hare Krishna, thank you for bearing with me. I think I took enough of your time. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Sri Krishna Bhagavan ki jai. Hare Krishna. I'll see you all.
Hare
Thanks.
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna Prabhu.